Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast.
You're in the right place, the perfect place, if you're looking for a wellness check-in team whose goal is to remind you to think about wellness and encourage you to make wellness a priority. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well.
This is episode 33.
A territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people. As part of a reconciliation process, we make our podcast from lands located within the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. We are treaty people, responsible to honor the original caretakers and to serve as stewards for the land. It's another week of Let's Be Well Together podcast, and it's John and Sammy. And we're talking about a social media post that we found on an Instagram page for what.is.mental.illness, and it talks about things I'm still learning.
Yeah.
So, do you want to start with any one of them, Sammy?
Yeah, for sure. So, I was just saying, I like this post because there's 6 points, but above each point, there's a different cactus. And, cactus isn't always the most beautiful plant that people want. But I think it says something in that, we are all beautiful and we are still growing and we need love and we need compassion and we might have some prickles here
right.
and there. But I think that was really a good kind of representation of people.
I wonder if they did that on purpose. So they're all potted plants with different kind of cactuses or cacti. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But
I thought it was really cool.
But I never even noticed that. So that's cool.
Yeah. I think being in social media, I'm always kind of looking at those different things that people do. And I think that was really cool for them to do.
I remember going back, one of the earlier philosophy assignments I had was pick any ad out of any magazine and break it down. Why are these symbols here? Why? And there's no right or wrong answer because, of course, we weren't involved in the process.
Right.
But when you start doing that, you do see a lot of really interesting things in ads and posts.
Yeah, everything is purposeful. But yeah, let's start with the first one. The first one is being patient with myself. I can relate to that one because sometimes I'm not patient with myself. I'm a lot more patient with others than I am with myself because sometimes I expect myself to get it right away. Whether that's, I don't know, a story or a problem that I need to fix or, I'm learning a new skill. And I think that's kind of the dancer in me. You get so used to just picking up things very fast that if you don't do it right away in any aspect of your life, it kind of, it kind of sits with you and you're like, I want to be perfect at it or I want to get it right away. I'm getting really impatient with myself. Impatient with myself. Yeah, not impatient, but impatient with myself. And sometimes that's within my own growth too and like within a relationship. And sometimes I'm like, why aren't our fights perfect yet? Why don't we know every single thing about each other? And that's just never going to happen.
I've been married a long time.
I know.
And I can tell you, like, one of the best things about it is the other person totally surprises you. And you're like, where did that come from? And it makes things more interesting.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's something I'm learning.
Well, I can tell you, being patient, a different spin on that is, of course, like for me, the biggest part of my weight loss and fitness journey was finally realizing that it can take months or even years to turn things around, and that's okay. In fact, that's what works. And so, we've talked about this before where you try and do the boot camp, and which is great, by the way, in its purpose.
Definitely.
But if you're, if you've totally let things slip like I did, and you think a boot camp is going to turn things around, you're sadly mistaken. And so you've got to be patient. You got to be like, look, I'm going to make a change, and I've learned, and now I'm very comfortable with it. Yeah. Which has taken me a long time to be comfortable, but I'm very comfortable with, okay, I'm just going to start slow, and it's going to be incremental, and it's going to be manageable. Yeah. And I won't be where I want to be tomorrow or next week or 2 months from now. Yeah. But maybe a year from now I will be.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really important because, especially within the social media world, you see very quick transitions, whether that's, renovations on a house or body transformations. It's a 10-second reel or TikTok that just happens in 10 seconds, and you're like, wow, this person did this so fast. Like, I want to be able to do that. But then it's the best when these influencers are fully transparent and real, and they're like, listen, this has taken me 6 months to do. if that's a home renovation. It might have taken you 3 years to get to your, happiness within your body and stuff. So that's really important, I think.
Yeah, because a lot of times on social media too, somebody might have taken that first picture 1 year, and then 2 years later they take the good picture, and then they post it at the same time. They don't post it 2 years ago,
No.
and they're just like, look at my change.
Yeah, exactly. Look how awesome I am now.
Yeah. So I really believe that being patient with myself and letting good things take time is being a really valuable life lesson I learned. And luckily for me, this post about things I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And that one's pretty solid in me now, and I really rely on it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What's another one?
Yeah, I think another one is setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is very important.
And you've talked a lot about that. And how do you see that play out, and how does it help?
Yeah, I think I'm still learning every day. And again, it's a lot easier said than done to set a boundary with someone, especially when it's someone you love and care about, because that typically is where you need to set those boundaries. Whether it's family, friend, or again, partner. It might be a coworker, but typically when it's someone you don't have that like emotional relationship with, it's a lot easier to set a boundary. You can be like, listen, I'm not getting that done today. It's going to be to you on Friday.
But to challenge you a bit on that, so I'm kind of out of touch with your generation, but trying to learn, trying to understand. Do you guys talk much about setting boundaries at work? Because I can tell you, here's how we set boundaries at work when I grew up.
Yeah.
Can I please have a job? Thank you.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? You got it.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to do, Webster. You're going to do it this way, and you're going to like it. I do like it.
Yeah.
That's me setting boundaries. But obviously now I hear a lot more with younger people.
Yeah.
Millennials, Gen Z.
Yeah. And
where they're trying to set boundaries. But is it comfortable setting boundaries at work, or is it really hard?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's definitely hard. I think depending on your line of work and who your boss is and who your manager is, creating like an open and welcoming workspace, and especially a work environment that values your own mental health, I think is really important.
So do you think that if you, let's say for example, because another thing that's a lot different too is in my generation, it was like,
you do what you're told.
There's companies A, B, C, D, and E.
Yeah.
Those are the big five.
Yeah.
And I want to get in on one of those companies, and thank goodness if I do, and that's my life, and I'll retire when I'm 65 or 70 or whatever it is.
Yeah. That's not even a thing.
No, like, and now millennials, I'd say, like, where do you want to end up? And they're like, end up? I don't even know where I want to be 2 years from now.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, on LinkedIn, I see this all the time. They're calling it the Great Resignation. Millennials are resigning everywhere they are going. And I think it's because we know what we're worth, and we know how not to be treated, versus for a long time it was you go to work, you stay here for 6 years, and you retire. But now it's, no, I can actually jump around from different workplaces, meet new people, network, gain new skills, versus if you stay in the same place, you might still gain quite a few skills. I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you grow. But I've actually looked into this and stuff, and it talks about how millennials and people who switch from different companies actually end up with a higher pay raise, because it's almost like you're worth more when you go to another company. So they offer you more. And if you're not feeling like you're being treated like that in your own workplace, we're not afraid to see ya. Okay,
so then let me come back to this setting boundaries point. And so what I'm wondering is, because I suspect it's not all about the higher salary, but
no.
So let's say with all this going on, people having a different frame of mind.
Yeah.
If you found a place that let you set boundaries, or at least let you have that conversation where you felt comfortable talking to the coworkers and people, whether they're same level, below, higher, about these things, and working your way through it so that you can have a good mental health environment. Would that be attractive and make you want to stay?
Definitely. I think culture is one of the leading factors when people are choosing a workplace. Culture is so important, and people are way more likely to leave a job due to the culture than due to their salary or their actual job. People will jump around nowadays, or at least millennials. We will jump around and find the place that we feel comfortable. I've had some really bad jobs where the culture seemed really good, but it was not. And, it really affected my own mental health. So I left for something that I now really enjoy. And even before then, I had some really good jobs that I also left just because I was wanting to go in a different direction, right?
Well, that's fair, and that's life.
Yeah.
But if it's the culture that's a problem, I mean, what I find interesting, though, is, and there's probably a lot of really smart people out there who figured things out. I don't know what it is, but I don't know how I could if you were applying to work with me, for example, I'm not sure how I could communicate well enough the culture. I think I could say some good things, but ultimately, I think you have to start working there to figure out if it actually matches what you were hoping for.
Yeah, definitely. Because recruiters are going to say, we have the best culture out there. We do this, and this for you. But you don't see it until you're in there. Even like something as small as your vacation days is so important. I have friends that now have unlimited vacation days because the trust has been put in them that they're going to get their work done. And if they need a vacation, if they need a mental health day, they can take it whenever they need. And I think that's really important. Or I have other friends that have gone down to 4-day work weeks. So they get every Friday off. And that's something that they really like. And I think just acknowledging someone's personal life outside of the office, and not that this is where they will, they'll die on this turf and this will be their end goal to work at this place and move forward with us. Like, no, they have a personal life outside of this and they don't want to carry work into that personal life. So yeah.
We hit 2 of the 6 things we're still learning and we're out of time.
Right. Yeah.
But they're fascinating.
Very.
And I really love that last conversation and the information you're giving me because, it really does show that workplaces, there've got to be dynamic changes, and I think they're underway.
I think so.
I think that there's a lot of mistakes being made, a lot of people stubbing their toes, but the good places are trying to figure this out.
And they'll listening to their employees and hearing them out, what they want, what's going to make them happy is the most important, I think, because some companies will ask you what you want and you tell them and they just ignore you and continue to do what they want to do.
Yeah, well, it is interesting too. Maybe just finish it off. If I go back to an interview by Adrian Decoux, we were talking about a completely different subject, but the one thing he was saying, he was talking about if you want to understand people, including young people in the workplace, you have to at least ask them.
Definitely.
And it's okay then to not agree with them.
Yeah.
And have a conversation about that. But the mistake we make is not understanding them. And the only way you can understand them is to talk to them and ask them.
Have the conversation.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds.
Today's interview is in the categories of mental and physical wellness. This is the first of 2 interviews with Imran Kamal. The first focuses on Imran recognizing his alcohol addiction. In a future interview, we'll chat with him about how he's working to treat the addiction. So welcome, Imran.
Thank you.
Imran is a lawyer working for the province of Ontario and specializing in Indigenous rights. He started his career in 2013 practicing in family law with a focus on custody and access issues. He soon transitioned to Catholic Children's Aid Society of Hamilton, where he worked until last year. Imran is a certified specialist in Indigenous legal issues and the only child protection lawyer in Ontario with this designation. In 2021, Imran was named one of the top 25 most influential lawyers in Canada by Canadian Lawyer magazine. Imran's passion is to work frontline and grassroots. In 2017, he established Hamilton Lawyers Feed the Hungry, which gathers volunteers from the legal community to financially support and prepare and serve meals for 80 to 100 children and youth. Since 2016, Imran has also been a weekly volunteer at a men's live-in addiction treatment center, providing support and resources for men overcoming alcohol and drug addiction. Additionally, he's a board member of Mission Services of Hamilton and the AIDS Network. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so the focus of our first interview is your story. And I really appreciate you coming on. It's challenging for people to talk about these personal issues in public. And I think it does help when people like you do that. And I'm particularly interested in how you recognize that you had an alcohol addiction. So maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so, I'll jokingly start by saying I'm Imran, I'm an addict, and I'm not unemployed, homeless, and I do have all of my teeth. And for me, one of the main reason I'm here speaking about this today is to destigmatize addiction. As a lawyer and in society in 2022, there's still a huge stigma out there around what an addict looks like. And I struggled with that a lot through my story and through my journey. And so starting back in early days, I grew up in Brampton, Ontario. My parents were together. I'm the youngest of three siblings. We went to a Catholic school, and from the outside looking in, things were well. A big part of my story is that my father also suffers from the disease of addiction. And, thankfully he is now over 20 years sober. But that caused a lot of chaos in my childhood. And, from the outside looking in, things looked great, but on the inside, my family life was in turmoil. When I look back, I often think, like, despite seeing what the horrors of addiction look like, they weren't enough to keep me away from going on my own journey, experimenting with drugs and alcohol. That kept me in denial a lot, right? So I managed to keep up good grades. I came from a middle-class family, and I always was able to use those as an excuse to field off any sort of criticisms or the comments people would make about any potential problems that I had, right? I relied on good grades and social acceptability.
Are you saying that you were able to leverage the fact that you're doing well in school to say to people things like, well, how bad can it be? I'm successful at school.
Exactly, right? And I'm talking like high school years, right? And into university. So we're not really talking about huge successes in the career life yet, but really the success from social acceptability is measured in school and friends and, that sort of stuff. And so I always was able to use that as a crutch to say that, how bad could it be? I'm not like other people. I'm not like the alcoholics and addicts that you see on TV.
And did you find that was more helping you convince other people, helping you convince yourself, or both?
Probably both. I think I was in really deep denial. I can say that, like, I can remember back to, like, I want to say 15, 16 years old. And at that point, my father was already a few years sober. And he had started saying, like, I think you might have a problem and I think you might need some help, and sort of pushing that away and being able to say, well, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm young. I'm doing fine in school. It's just a phase. I'm just partying. Everybody does it. This is what kids do these days. And to find all of those external excuses to field off any sort of criticism.
Does that mean that you were drinking already at 15 and 16?
Yes.
Okay. So when did that start?
And I often try to think of this when I had my first drink, and I don't know the exact age, but it was somewhere in around the age of 12, 13 years old.
Okay. That is earlier than I would have expected, but I'm jumping in and peppering you with questions, and I don't want you to kind of lose the rhythm of where you were at.
Yeah, and I can tell you, like, it's interesting hearing, people say, like, wow, 12, 13 is very young. And looking back now, it is. And I can say that. But at the time, it certainly didn't feel like I was doing anything that wasn't normal, right? I started drinking with older friends, older siblings, cousins, things like that. And you never really thought twice about it. And it always started off in the name of just good fun, right? Like summer nights, barbecues, family get-togethers, things like that. And you kind of just chalk it up to, okay, yeah, we're just having a good time. I'd say through later in high school, I felt my inside starting to fall apart. And what I mean by that is, like, there's a lot of layers to addiction, right? And there's often, mental health concerns. And I suffered from depression through the later years of high school. And drinking and partying became my coping mechanism. And so eventually I formed this identity of being the party guy. And that helped me sort of like be okay with life, right? And find that acceptability among my peers, right? By always being the guy who had the most alcohol or, being the life of the party. And so again, I stayed in my denial by forming that identity for a while. And then after high school, I went on to university, and shortly thereafter, I went to law school in England. And that's where I would say is like sort of the beginning of the end, or sort of the peak, where I started partying a lot harder, but I still managed to get really good grades. And at that point, I remember my roommates in law school started saying, like, we think you have a drinking problem. And again, I was just like, no, this is university. This is what people do. Like, I'm just having fun. I'll get over it. And lo and behold, I finished law school and I moved home back to Canada. And that's when things started falling apart, right? And so I struggled to study for the bar ads. I started working as a lawyer. Like, I got called to the bar eventually, and I secured my first job at a firm. And after 6 months, I was let go. And it's hard to even think back to that, right? And I was let go in the name of, like, I wasn't producing or I wasn't billing, but I now know, and I look back at it, it's because I was preoccupied and I was going to work hungover and I just wasn't giving it my all, right? I wasn't being the man or the lawyer that I wanted to be or that I knew that I could be.
When you say that you don't like to look back, or it's hard to look back, is that because, it feels bad to remember those times? Is it because it's hard to remember? Like, what part of it do you mean it's hard to look back?
It's two pieces. I think it's there's a bit of shame and guilt around it because it's certainly not a phase and a point in my life that I was proud of or I am proud of. And yeah, and there's a bit of a disconnection to it now, right? Like, I'm almost 7 years clean and sober. And so, like, looking back, there's a bit of disbelief, like, wow, that was me.
Right.
Because it's very far removed from the life I live today.
How did you eventually recognize that you had to do something about it? Was it an event? Was it a series of events? How did that work?
Yeah, and that's the interesting point. And I guess what I was just trying to draw on is, like, there were all these material things or circumstances in my life, losing a job, losing relationships, that for a lot of people would be, quote unquote, rock bottom. And then that's not my story. There wasn't a catastrophic, large event or circumstance that led me to seek help. In and around 2014, I started recognizing that I was having a problem because I was drinking and using every day and basically needed it to function, quite frankly. And so at that point, I recognized that I had a problem because of all of the external factors, but I wasn't at a point of getting help yet. And it was 2015. It was actually the day after my birthday. A childhood best friend of mine who I was very close to growing up and still am now, but I hadn't spoken to in I want to say 6 to 9 months at that point in time. And he called me and said, I'd like to take you for lunch for your birthday. And he picked me up and we were driving to Toronto. I lived in Burlington, or I currently live in Burlington too.
And just to tell people who aren't familiar, that's probably what, like an hour drive?
Yeah, about 45 minutes, okay. I would say.
All right.
And so we were driving to Toronto for lunch, and I for the last 7 years, I continue to rack my brain on this. I don't know why, but at some point we stopped in the IKEA parking lot. That's in Etobicoke, so about half an hour from home. We didn't go into IKEA, so I actually still can't remember why we stopped in the IKEA parking lot. But I broke down and I started crying to my childhood best friend, and I said, I have a problem. I'm addicted and I need some help. And he had, we grew up, and so he had known about my father's recovery, and he said, you should go seek help through the 12 steps the way your dad did. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And so I had gone on Google and I looked up, 12-step fellowships, and I decided that I was going to go to a meeting a few days later. And that's how I started my journey in recovery. But it was like the simplest way that I could put what got me the desire to get clean and sober was that I was just tired of living that way. And I was tired of hurting people. I was tired of hurting myself. And I was tired of it.
So we're kind of getting toward the end, and I have a question I ask every guest, but before we go to that, it is interesting. So completely unrelated, and this is anecdotal, we're not experts, but we had a couple times where people were talking, and it seems like, especially the context was parents talking to kids, and when they can have some really good conversations. A couple examples that came up are driving. When you're not looking at each other, but you're side by side and going for a long walk in the woods or something, or a long walk. And I find it interesting that it was in that context with someone you trust, with the feelings that you knew you had to deal with, and somehow in that context of sitting side by side with someone you trust, it all came out. So it makes me think that there really is something to that. That, for example, if a parent wants to talk to one of their kids about something, that's not a bad way to go. Go for a long drive, find some reason to do that. Anyway, before I turn to my last question, the context of this first interview is essentially coming to grips with the fact that you had this issue and you had to deal with it. And, your story is quite interesting. I just don't want to cut you off if there was anything else you wanted to chat about before we wrap up.
No, I think, for me, my experience has been that it's not about the external factors. It's not about losing jobs or, losing money or being in debt. I was all of those things far before I decided to get clean, but it was the inside pain, that desperation on the inside that was the motivating factor for me to change my life and to get clean and sober.
Well, I love you coming on and talking to us because I suspect that that's a similar feeling that many people have, that it's not, a dramatic, everything fell apart and I lost everything moment. But I think for a lot of people, you have this weight that's carrying you and dragging you down. And ultimately, fortunately for you and some others, they realize it and they can find a way forward. And it'll be great to talk to you next time about how you're working on that way forward.
Yes.
Okay, so we asked our guests the same two questions in the context of having different areas of wellness. None of us have enough time in the day, it seems, to have balance in all of them at any given time. So the question we ask everybody, it's kind of a mini wellness check-in. Are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of one thing that you can do to foster wellness in that area?
Yes. For me, it's right now, and it's self-reference to where I'm at today. It's my spiritual wellness. For me, my spiritual wellness includes a rigorous practice of prayer and meditation to the God of my understanding. And I use that term very loosely without any religious connotation. And I've been neglecting my meditation practices, and I think that's something that's kept me on the right path over the last, nearly 7 years. And it's been really critical to my recovery, and I've been neglecting that. So I need to get back on that.
I love that. We've heard a few people talk about meditation, and on prior shows, I've said that's something I'd like to learn. I am going to look into it. I don't know when that will be, but I've heard so many great things about it, and I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, so we're going to have you back, and thanks again, and that's it from my side.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. It's been a really up and down sort of week for me this week. To be honest, there have been a few more downs than ups. But that's okay. You can't win them all, and sometimes it's good to practice rolling with the punches. Among others, the biggest punch this week was that the clutch in my car decided to die. And that kind of stinks because I need my car to get to and from all the lessons I'm supposed to be doing. So, a little bit interesting rescheduling some of that stuff, but we're getting through it. Some good positives from this week, though. I had an opportunity, in fact, it's my first opportunity, to take some time away from lessons and use that time to explore some of the music scene here in Ottawa. So it was my first time running around and throwing myself into the scene, and I had a chance to perform at an open mic here in Ottawa at a place called Live on Elgin. Super cool venue, and it was a really strong open mic. Great turnout, like a full place. All of the acts were really talented, and it was quite varied. There was poetry reading, there was poetry reading set to music, there was original music, there were covers, there was hip-hop with a drum machine, there was a guy playing jazzy piano. It was really cool, nice mix. I did a couple acoustic tunes and sang, and I went by myself, but after I performed, one of the other performers came up to me and said, "Hey, are you here by yourself?" I said, "Yeah, I don't really know anybody yet. I'm pretty new." And so they invited me to sit with them, and I got to connect with a few other local musicians, make some new friends. Kind of cool. So it was nice to get back out and about and play a little bit without having to drive a huge time to and from big gigs, A nice change of pace. I'm looking forward to exploring some of the other open mics and starting to work my way into full-on performances, not just, open mic nights. But it's a great way to get your foot in the door and to meet some other musicians and other folks. And like I said, all of the acts that I got to take in were really good. Super cool. One guy even did an Eminem cover on the piano and the full rap and everything. All the profanity, you name it. He went right for it. 10 out of 10. Super fun. That's pretty much all I got for you this week. Stay tuned for further releases. Working away behind the scenes here with a few artists. Session work stuff. And I'm actually working with another guy on his podcast coming up, just to do the sort of, the transitions and the musical stuff. So it's still pretty busy. And here's hoping my car gets fixed soon. And that it's not a huge, huge dent in my wallet. Cars, they're amazing when they work, but otherwise, what a bundle of stress, eh? Gee whiz. All right, that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners, and it's great that you could join us. We could use your help. How? Listen to our episodes, subscribe to us, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together. And make sure you tell your friends about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
So our listeners know that I love comedy and making exercise part of everyday life. And I like to talk about different types of exercise. So we have the perfect mix today. I'm talking with stand-up comedian Doug Koning, who loves weightlifting. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you and Tim Nicholson have a podcast, Best Worst Friends. And I started listening to it after I saw you perform at a Rusty Nail show at Crazy Canuck in Kitchener. And you've mentioned a few times on your podcast that you really like weightlifting. And I'm hoping to talk to somebody about that. So just for a little context for you, I do at times get into weights. Nice. I've got a good set, but then I keep falling off it. I fall on it and off it. What I know is when I'm on it, I feel great. So how long have you been doing weightlifting?
I gave it a shot years ago, not really knowing what I was doing, just with a buddy while I was in university. But probably the last 3-4 years I've been taking it more seriously and, devoting a lot of my spare time to watching weightlifting videos and, trying to figure out different programs and different, smarter approaches to it. Because a lot of the time I found myself kind of just spinning my tires in the gym, or not knowing what I was doing. I used to think a workout wasn't done until I injured myself.
Right.
I was I go to shoulder press and my shoulder hurts and I'm like, oh, well, now I'm done because my shoulder hurts. That's a ding going off, oh, now I can go home. But then you realize that it's all about progressive overload and it's something you have to work on over time.
I remember you saying at one point too, that technique is so important. And a couple of friends of mine who were into it, when they were giving me some tips and some programs to try, they always said, take your time and get the mechanics right, because you're kind of wasting your time. So how do you learn all that?
That's, again, just a lot of trial and error, a lot of videos about technique. Also, there's a lot of really nice people at the gym I go to who, if they see you doing something wrong, they're going to come up and be like, no, stop. You're going to hurt yourself. I'll see the huge jacked guys at the gym and, I'll see them tagged in the Instagram of my gym's page, and I'll go to their profile, and then you look back 5-6 years and they're just small, skinny little dudes.
Wow.
Who just worked on it that hard that, when they give you any feedback, you're like, yeah, I will be applying that right away. And also a lot of the time just watching other people in the gym, right? You see someone, if you want to bench press 225 pounds, why not just watch someone doing that? That's one of the better ways to learn as well.
So when you're firing on all cylinders, how many times are you getting to the gym in a week?
I've had more obsessive times where I was going every day for hours, but at the moment, with my day job, being pretty physical, I'm probably going every other day or so. I'm actually going to go right after this. So I kind of just fit it in wherever I can in my schedule, but just try and make sure that I get it in as much as I can.
Well, you're still a young guy. I'm an older guy. And for us, it's not good for me to work out every day doing the same thing, because I need more time to heal. Sure. Did you find when you were doing the kind of the hardcore many hours a day every day that made it being a bit too much?
Oh, it was for sure too much. And then you get to a point where it's detrimental to do that much. You're not really doing anything other than feeding your ego.
Right.
And when you're doing that much, because you're not progressing.
And
right? Like you could bring yourself to absolute failure every day, but if you don't give yourself enough time to recover and rest and eat properly and all that, then it's just kind of all for naught.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone's different. For you, like when you say progress, is it a matter of feeling stronger? Is it a matter of actually seeing bigger muscles? Is it a matter of how you feel? What is it?
For me, it's honestly just like seeing the numbers go up is great. And then being able to keep those numbers as well, because a big part of it for me was I used to be a lot bigger, right? Like I used to be about 440 pounds or so, and weightlifting became a big part of how I lost weight and kind of keep it off, because the more muscle mass you have, the more calories at like a base rate your body will burn, right? So it's almost makes more sense to put muscle on as you're losing the fat, and then that'll kind of help you be able to eat more and, you know, look better too.
Yeah, that's where I'm actually struggling right now. I've kind of put on weight during COVID, and I keep saying I'm trying to lose it, but I think ultimately it's because I'm not doing strength training. That's my biggest obstacle right now. I just don't have enough muscle mass to be burning those calories.
Yeah.
Even though
no time to like the present to get back into it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's why I like to have these conversations too. Now, the other thing for me is like I do a lot of running, and honestly, when I'm out there, it's not always like, oh, I love this. Like sometimes it is, but sometimes it's a bit of a grind when I'm out there. But when then what that makes me feel is just walking around in my everyday life, I just feel so much better. Does weightlifting help in that regard?
Yeah, it's a lot of things you don't even realize until you kind of just look at yourself compared to other people, and you're like, oh, I am pretty strong. You know, like you're bringing in groceries that maybe someone has to take like 2-3 trips.
Right.
And you're just doing it in one, you know, or, you know, I'll buy a bunch of something that's heavy and I'm carrying it in one arm like it's nothing. And, you know, you'd see other people like struggling with it. And it's nice to see like the practical application of strength as well.
And do you see yourself doing it for a long time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I think this is something I'd probably do for the rest of my life. For me, the number one thing is like the mental benefits I get from it, like just feeling like you accomplish something, you know, and we were talking about video games just before this. For me, it's almost like upgrading your stats in real life. You know, like I think about all the time what I used to be able to do and what I could do now. And it's honestly mind boggling for me. Or like I look at like the first time I shoulder pressed with like dumbbells. I remember doing 30 pounds each hand and felt like I was going to die after doing a couple, but then now that's like my warm up. You know, it's nice to see that actual progression.
I think I have to build up to that. So anyway, well, that's awesome. I really appreciate your time. I do think that it's something I'm going to get back into. And I think especially as people age, it really helps strength training. So I appreciate hearing from someone who likes doing it.
For sure. And I think, honestly, I wish it was a thing that older generations did more of. Like whenever I see videos on Instagram of like an 80-year-old woman deadlifting or something like that, all I think is, wow, she's going to have her mobility for the rest of her life. You know, she's never going to struggle to get out of a chair because she has more muscle mass. She can pick up her grandkids. She can, you know, maybe live on her own for longer. Like I just see it as like an investment in your health in the long term as well.
Totally. And I the other thing I worry about, I think, is as you get older, you can't just wait till you lose it all and then rebuild it. It's not like when you're young. So I think it's the kind of thing you have to keep doing, like doing in your 50s and your 60s, so that then you can do it in your 70s and older. So
yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, good luck with your weightlifting journey, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Awesome.
There's a thought. Popped up while running.
One of the great byproducts of the podcast is that I'm often having a really pleasant thought as I'm out for my run. It's a theme that repeats itself pretty regularly. And that's about how my ideas of my theory of wellness are coming together more and more as I do this podcast, talk to guests, talk to co-hosts, and figure more things out. It's amazing how even just one little nugget here and one little nugget there can make me understand things that much better. And it's really a lot of fun. So when I was out for my run today, I realized something else and how that's all working. It's part of a process that I've seen repeat itself many times over the years with me. The way it typically works as follows. And initially I didn't realize this was going to happen, so I was resistant to this process. So I would come up with a good idea and I would want to tell somebody about it, because either that person is going to be part of the idea or part of the project or whatever. And my anticipation would be I would tell the person, I have this great idea, and they would be, whoa, you're brilliant, you're amazing, what a great idea. Didn't usually work out that way. Usually what would happen would be I would say, I have this great idea. And a person would say, oh, well, how are you going to deal with this? And be like, oh, or they'd say, oh, I like that. What if you also did this? And I'd be like, hey, make up your own ideas. These are my ideas. I'm brilliant. So I would resist, and I would be like wondering, why aren't these people going with the flow? Like, why are they adding their 2 cents? Why are they poking and prodding? Why are they finding these little flaws? But it didn't take very long till I realized that instead of taking a resistant approach, you approach it with an open heart, an open mind. And when you do that and you hear what they're saying, it doesn't take long before you also realize that your idea gets even better. It improves. And so that's what I was thinking about on my run today. How if you open your mind, if you open your heart, and you do get great ideas, and when you share them, you can hear input from other people that make your idea even better, then you should latch onto that. You shouldn't resist it. And so I'm really grateful to the people who are helping me in that process with this wellness theme. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin. I saw this funny thing on Facebook, so I thought I would share it. It's things I'm super good at. So I'll read some of them. Forgetting someone's name 10 seconds after they tell you it. That happens to me all the time. Does that happen to you?
Yes. And the problem is I don't pay attention sometimes. And then you can't ask someone what their name is 10 seconds after they told it to you.
No. And
so then you're listening.
Yeah, because you haven't met the person before. And so you just met them and you're taking in everything, like what they're wearing, what they do, what they're, everything. And they tell you their name and it's totally gone. So embarrassing. 2 is digging through the trash for the food box that you just tossed away because you already forgot the directions.
Yeah. And okay. What's another one?
Leaving laundry in the dryer until it wrinkles, then turning on the dryer to de-wrinkle it, only to forget that you left it there.
Yeah, so it's wrinkled again. And I guess these can happen at any age, but it made me think of, as you get older, you forget things so much easier. It's
much easier.
Terrible. And that just so I mentioned that to you, and you were saying other things about how life turns out in ways you don't expect.
Yeah, because I was thinking of how, when you're younger, you're just always trying to go up that ladder. You're trying to get through school. You're trying to achieve this. You're trying to achieve that. And then, you get to the point in your life where you've achieved everything, or, and you realize that it's not quite what you expected, or it's not what makes you happy. And so you have to change your expectations.
Or at least you realize they're different. And just as a segue, though, I'm a complete sidetrack for a second. Sorry, Sammy, this isn't meant to as a zinger, but I was talking on one of the shows with Sammy.
Okay.
And we were talking about things, and we were talking about expectations.
Right.
Right. And I was kind of making that point, but I said, yeah, because it kind of depends on your age and stage of life.
Right.
And she's like, no, I've always been like this. Right. And I'm like, Sammy, you're only in your 20s. Like, you'll see that it's different. Like, yes, you've always had expectations because you're still at that period of life where you're on, like you said, the ladder.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you're 40, when you're 50, when you're 60, things will change. I don't know about 60. I'm not 60 yet.
We won't ever be 60. But it's just that, when you're young, you are always trying to achieve. And some kids are overachievers, right? And I think that's what Sammy was saying, that she always felt that stress of always having to be number one, or do the best she could.
We were just talking about the difference between goals and expectations, but
right.
But you're right. Like, she was still in that frame of mind where there's on the expectation side or the goal setting side, but either one, like goal setting is, I think, better because you're setting a goal. If you don't make it, you're okay because you learn from it. Expectations is if you don't make it, you don't feel great. But
right.
More importantly, the point is at that kind of stage and age, you're still looking up the ladder and figuring out how do you achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah. And when you're at our level, you're looking at what are you hoping to get out of life? Like, instead of trying to achieve everything, you're like, okay, I want to be happy. I want to,
And in some cases, it's like, well, I did achieve those things.
Yeah.
You know what? It wasn't what I was expecting.
No.
And some of the stuff that I thought was important isn't as important.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that I didn't think was important is more important.
Yeah, for sure. And that reminds you of a quote that you have.
Right. Like that. So it goes back to the John Lennon quote, which is, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Like, so once you've gone through a bunch of this, and I'm hoping that we're kind of halfway through, but maybe we're 2/3 or 3/4, who knows? But you start to realize that a lot of this stuff that happened in between, that was the rich stuff.
Yeah.
And there's tons of quotes about that too.
Exactly. Yes.
Anyway, so let's go back to your list, because one of the things that I do appreciate, and you can't help but laugh at, is you're busy when you're young doing all these expectations and goals. And then when you're older, you're like, you just laugh at the fact that now you're at the point where you can't even remember stuff. So what are the other ones on that list, just to finish off?
Okay, so another one is writing out a grocery list and then realizing when you get to the grocery store that you forgot the list.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And the last one is making plans and then immediately regretting making plans.
I don't get that one.
Well, like, so you make plans that you're going to go work out, or you're going to go, to, you know what I mean? Or even, plans of going out for dinner. And then you realize, oh shoot, I don't really want to put on clothes. I want to stay in my pajamas. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to, so that kind of thing. Or, you're having people over and you got a lot of work to do. You got to clean the house, that type of thing. You immediately regret having to make the plans.
Well, let's hope for all our listeners that some good life happens when they're busy making other plans. Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
We hope you liked the episode. It is sign-off time. It's Sheila here with Sammy and John.
Hello.
Hi.
So I had a great weekend. I worked a wedding that was both Friday and Saturday. And on Friday, I got to work with my niece, Sheila, that I haven't worked with in a long time. And that was fun. And then on Saturday, I got to work with my sister, which I've never worked with. That's Sammy's mom. And that was really fun. And
you worked with her decades ago.
Not in a while.
Okay. Yeah. Decades ago.
At a restaurant, I mean.
Yeah. And it was so much fun working with her and funny at the same time. Yeah. So anyways, that was great. And then this week I'm so busy. I've got work and then I've got social engagements every single night of the week. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, I'm playing cards on Friday. I'm on Monday and Tuesday. I'm doing yoga. Wednesday, I'm picking flowers.
I don't parachute until Friday into the social engagement.
No, you parachute on Thursday because they're going to the comedy show.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and Sammy and David are coming with us.
That's right.
Anyways, that's enough about my social life. How are you doing, Sammy?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, the house is going well.
Oh, yes, we broke into it today and it was beautiful.
10 minutes before I got there, I was like, oh, you were there? I didn't leave a trace of you being there at all.
No, I'm really good at that.
Yeah, no, it's going really well. Just trying to finish up everything. But this weekend, we're just waiting on materials. So we didn't have a ton to do. So we actually got to just kind of hang out and, watch some movies.
No way.
Which is really nice. I haven't been able to just watch a movie in a while.
And what movie did you watch?
So we watched the new Thor.
Oh, great.
The new Thor.
Nice.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It wasn't like my favorite of the Thors, but it made me laugh and it had a really good ending.
Perfect.
So I was happy with that. And it was nice to just hang
another
out.
world, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. How about you, John?
Okay. Well, first of all, I can't believe that I forgot that I'm going to the comedy festival on Thursday at Rusty Nail. And in fact, one of the guys who's going to be on that show, Doug Koning, did a couple interviews. One of them is going to be on, I think, next week. He's going to talk about weightlifting. The main thing today for me is what a relief. I have been struggling on my long runs, and we are now 21 days away from a day where I have to run 42.2 kilometers. I usually do 21 on Thursday and 32 on Sunday, and they just have been feeling terrible. We had some friends over yesterday, somebody who I'd met at Park Run, who's from England, Fiona and Simon. And Fiona reminded me of a couple things that I'd forgotten about. And so I tried them today and they worked amazing.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I actually finished the 32K and I felt like, oh, I can do this. So I haven't been saying this, but inside I've been thinking, I'm not going to be able to do this. And
Yeah.
so today, for the first time, I'm thinking, I can do this. So I'm going to
Awesome.
stop on that high.
Yeah.
And it was nice because talking to Fiona, we got a lot of ideas for London. So we're starting to plan that. And then today, I kind of organized another day to go to Swansea when we go to London. So that's exciting too. And then don't forget to tell them what we're doing this weekend.
Well, hang on a second, because Swansea is not in London. Swansea's in Wales on the other side of the country.
Right. But we have organized the day that we're going to go from London to Swansea.
That sounds awesome. So I said I parachute in on Friday, and Friday's going to be fun because we're going to meet some friends. Jennifer, who's a listener to the show.
Awesome.
We are going to meet them in Niagara-on-Lake. Well, we're going to see them for dinner on Friday, and then Saturday we're going to do some biking in Niagara-on-Lake. And Sheila and I love doing that. We bike
Yeah.
from a winery to another and enjoy it.
Love it there.
So that is it. We hope you guys enjoy your week, enjoy the podcast, and we'll talk to you soon. That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.